Hello.
Hello,
For,
hello.
for those who don't know, I am Calahn de la Luna, director of the Blackthorne School, and this is one of my very favorite people, Reverend Dr. Aaron Davis. Thank you so much for joining
everyone.
us
Hello,
today.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Good to be here.
And we have some very fascinating and exciting things to talk about today.
Absolutely.
Most importantly, the Reverend Doctor is offering a very profoundly special course. This will be the second course that he has offered through the Blackthorne School. Would you like to share a bit about your course?
Sure. So, one of the things that a lot of people have come to me and said, both in and outside of my class, the current class, is they have taken other basic one-on-one introductory hoodoo classes, and they said they're okay, but what they find is there's nothing out there that's more advanced. And so a lot of people are frustrated by that because they said, I can keep taking those, but they just get boring after a while. There's only a few different ways to fix a candle, before it's like, okay, I've done that a million times. What else can I do with a candle?
How do I take it deeper? How do I take it to the next level?
Absolutely. And how do I even think about it in other ways other than just like how to fix a candle, So, after hearing that, even long before I even started, put together and taught the first class, I was thinking about that because I've heard other people say that, and I've even heard that, in marketing sometimes that they actually will tell authors and writers and presenters not to actually teach advanced work. And sometimes it's because people think people can't handle it, which is ridiculous. But a lot of times it's just because they're saying there's just not going to be enough interest to sell, to market, to put it out there. So just don't even do it. Just keep teaching basic stuff, cranking out, the kind of basic books we see at Barnes and Noble. That I go in there every now and then, like hoping to see something that's more interesting, and I'm always disappointed and depressed when I leave because it's not there.
I'm right there with you.
Yeah, it's just not
go
there.
in bookstores all the time, and now I guess I've reached a point of being so picky that I just don't think I'll find anything anymore. Right. So I don't even bother visiting the spiritual section anymore. It's just pretty sad. I mean, it doesn't really have something for everyone. It's more catered toward beginners.
Right. And there's nothing wrong with having something that's for beginners, because there are people who are always just starting out, which is totally
you have to start somewhere, right? And a lot of these provide that stepping stone for people.
Right. But to not have any space, any room, anything for people to be able to go deeper is also a big mistake, because in any tradition, you do need that, especially if it's a tradition that doesn't have any kind of clear system of elders or teachers or a temple somewhere like, Golden Dawn. There are Golden Dawn temples all over the place. You go, there's a whole process, it's all mapped out, you take the steps and there's somebody there with you the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
But hoodoo, hoodoo doesn't have any of that. It's a folk magical tradition. It's decentralized. The most systematization of it is really kind of the region of the country where you are. So if you're in Louisiana, that's a certain kind of hoodoo that's mixed with Vodun and Catholicism and other things. If you're in different parts of the South, that's the more kind of traditional hoodoo as we understand it. If you're in some of the mountainous areas, the hoodoo might be mixed with things like granny magic or Appalachian folk magic. So, that's where you get different systems. But even that, it's not like going to a Golden Dawn temple, it's not set up that way. So unless you come from a family that's been practicing this or know someone like one of us who's been teaching people for a long time and all that kind of stuff, unless you had that, you don't even know where to look. You don't even know where to look, because most root workers of any sort, they're not hanging out their shingles to say, here I am, because most of the ones who hang out shingles are doing it to do the work, like to do, professionally working to help people, but they're not saying, no, I'm a teacher of hoodoo, come to me and I will teach you actually how to do the tradition as I understand it, as it's been passed down to me from my mama, my grandmama, my great great grandma, so there's really not that many people doing that. I can count
Right.
on maybe a couple of fingers, people that I know that are kind of like that, but it's very rare, myself included. Like I said in the first class, I'm not traditionally taught in the sense that, somebody in my family taught me, because in my family line, my family pretty much put it aside and moved up north like a lot of African Americans did. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of the one that's closing that circle and kind of coming back around by learning it, practicing it, and now teaching it. And again, what I'm teaching is my version of it. It's not, 3 generations removed or something like that. Although I do have people who I've learned from who have that kind of connection, so, we do the best we can, we do the best we can. And we create this class and, put it in the Blackthorne School. And, I think people are going to be really excited. I think they're going to be surprised. Because the other thing that I have noticed from other people who are teaching some form of hoodoo or root work is very few are teaching spirit conjuration. And not just teaching how to conjure any kind of spirit, but actually teaching some kind of version of it that's actually connected to the tradition as we understand it.
Yeah.
So in my class, I do that. I draw from what's called the 6th and 7th books of Moses, and kind of show people through the class, how you work with some of the spirits in that grimoire that grimoire was historically a part of hoodoo, but root workers, as far as I can tell, they never actually did the spirit conjuration part. They were much more focused on like the seals and talismans and using those in mojos and doing a working for somebody and putting their name like using the seal like a name paper and then putting that in their Bible and praying over that and working that over time. But they weren't conjuring the Archangel Gabriel. They weren't doing that. And we can take an educated guess as to why. My read is they weren't doing that because they in part didn't really fully know how. Because even today, our ability, like our knowledge of the ceremonial magic, Solomonic magic, all that, it's really relatively recent. It's been like in the last probably 30 plus years that people really figured out how to kind of rebirth that system and then practice it in a way that made sense. So back in the early, late 19th, early 20th century, I don't think they yet had that knowledge together like we do now, anyone. So there was definitely a limitation there, but also I just think that root workers, especially back in the day, they weren't thinking along those lines. They weren't thinking about, I want to cast a circle and, spend 8 hours conjuring Gabriel and hope that he shows up. And, they didn't have time for all that. They were like, okay, no, I know Gabriel did this, that, this, and this. I got a mojo that I need to make for this person because they got this going on in their life. Boom, 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 healing there, herbs, curios, prayer, breathing, whiskey, tobacco. That's it. Here you go. And that was it. And then they moved on to the next client, the next situation, because that's the tradition. The tradition is, very earthy, this worldly, dealing with the problems and conditions that we have during our life, not so much conjuring spirits and developing kind of a deep personal connection with that angel or whoever it may be. But here's the big but. The reason why I did include this part is because I think it is not smart or feasible to develop a whole spiritual practice that revolves around the strength of your spirit only. I think that's really dangerous. Um, and if anyone who's watching this has been a worker for any length of time, we all have had the experience at some point of, kind of overdoing it. Maybe a family member comes with a crisis and we're so invested in that situation and helping them that we sometimes will throw caution to the wind, like all the stuff that we normally do to protect ourselves, safeguard ourselves, not take on too much of that other person's stuff. All that stuff, we'll throw it out the window because we're so concerned about that loved one. You do everything, their life goes great, your life takes a nosedive, and you're like, whoa, what happened? Why did my life suddenly turn upside down? And it's because too much of yourself was put into that work, or maybe things don't go sideways, but you finish that and you're just like, oh, you just wore out and you can't even bounce back. It's not like, you take a couple of days off and get rest and you're okay, because you spiritually drained your reserves. We're not gods or deities in the sense of, having limitless power. We're human, so there are limits on our power. So part of the reason why I added the spirit conjuration piece is to give people the strength for the long haul, and to give them allies, to give them, traditional allies that are traditional to hoodoo, not made up stuff, not something pulled from this neo-pagan thing over here and this Christian thing over there, that wasn't already a part of it, but actual traditional allies that I believe were a part of the tradition at some point. Mm-hmm. Or should have been a part of the tradition, if people had the knowledge to put all the pieces of the puzzle together. And then, you work with those allies, you call out to them, you establish a relationship, you perform ritual throughout the class, throughout the duration of the class and beyond. And then you have this really strong connection, mm-hmm. that you can use for, your love working, that you can use for making baths for yourself to rejuvenate yourself. You call the spirit ally and say, hey, I'm wiped out from all the work I've been doing this week. I need you to touch this bath and to put your potency, your power, your ache into this bath so that I can then get up and keep going. Because I got other people calling me tomorrow, or to say, hey, this I can already tell I'm talking to you, I'm divining with you, and I can already tell this working that I've been asked to do is going to be a doozy. It's going to really take a lot out of me. I need mm-hmm. you to help me. I need you to help carry some of this load. Mm-hmm. And it's not, they're not, I want to make this clear to you, because I know there are different schools of thought about spirits. Mm-hmm. I'm not about reproducing slavery. So, mm-hmm. This is not a thing where you're just kind of enslaving spirits to you and they're just you're cracking a whip and they're working. Like you need to give offering. You need to spend time. You got to develop the relationship. Light a candle, light some incense, put a food offering. Do those things over time so that, you feed them so they can feed you, right. And sustain, for the journey. So we go over all of that. And I talk about all of that. I talk about kind of the protocols and I give specific workings, but I also make it really clear that those are not, over the 16 weeks and they're not like, A to Z, you do this, you do that, you do this, and this is the only way you can do it. No, these are kind of like primers, they're working so that you get them, you see them. And then I say, okay, let's have a discussion in the class and think outside of the box. Mm-hmm. You see how I put this together. Now, if you had this situation, what would you do? If you had this situation, how would you change it? And just let the dynamism of that happen so that the light bulbs go off for people. And that is the advanced work. That's actually
absolutely. And this is not being taught online anywhere else that I've found. Have you?
No. The only thing that I know of, and I won't name them, just out of professional respect, but I'm aware of another rootworking group that what they do, their advanced course, or if you want to call it that, is a week-long training where you have to come to them for a week, work for them, find your own like lodging, your own food, your room and board. Like you have to figure all that out. And then you go and work for them for a week and they teach you while you're there. So I'm like, okay, that's, okay model. But, for one thing, that requires a huge commitment. I mean, who had the time to take a solid week off for, three, at least 2 times a year for a couple of years, I think, because I think they have 3 or 4 of those sessions, who had that kind of time? And if you do, do you really want to go studying something, or do you want to just be off? And I know for me, when I'm taking time off, I don't really want to be doing, even spiritual stuff, because I'm doing spiritual stuff all the time. I don't want to be doing spiritual stuff on my time off.
Spiritual work is still work. Yeah.
It sure is. It sure is, so, so, I'm not going to be overly critical of their model, but there's some parts of it that just, even when I thought of taking that, just felt very impractical, because I'm like, okay, that means I got to be off for work. That means, I'm losing that time to be off.
Right.
And
Some
I
people
already
just
have a
don't
difficult
have
job.
that sort of ability to press pause for a week and
Right.
go immerse themselves, which I mean, immersion is great if you can, but it's also a privilege, right?
Right. Absolutely. And so that's why, I sound like I'm plugging in Blackthorne School, and I am, but that's not why I'm saying what I'm about to say.
Yeah, we're not
that's
bashing
why
anyone else's program, but part of
right.
our goal is to make it more accessible to a variety of people from way different lifestyles and backgrounds.
Exactly. And that's what that's what I was going to say. That's what I like about our model is it doesn't require you to like log on at a certain time of day, be on for a certain amount of time, finish it all by a certain final date, and even the way my classes are, yes, things kind of build on each other, but it's not like, you got to keep up with the weeks, because if you don't keep up with the weeks, sorry, too bad, so sorry, so sad. It's not like that. It doesn't have that kind of frenetic pace that just stresses you out. I mean, you'll be more stressed by the end of that class than you were before you took it, and that kind of defeats the point. It defeats the point. So I much prefer this model, especially with this advanced material, some of which just requires time, time to absorb it. In the case of the Spirit Ally, it takes time to build that relationship. It's not like a, one-shot ritual and you're done. Like, yeah, there's a kind of beginning ritual, but then there's a maintenance ritual that you do over a number of days. And the whole point of that is to really bond with that spirit and, even see if the spirit will say things to you as you're developing that relationship and kind of begin to do its own process of teaching. And that's the other piece.
It's a profound piece that is very important and very missing in a lot of instruction. And that is the critical component, in my opinion, of what will take people to an advanced level of practice.
Absolutely. And as you know, I practice other spiritual traditions that are very ancestor focused. So for me, the ancestors, our ancestors, they are the greatest teachers, especially because most of us at some point have had indigenous practitioners in our line, whether we're from Ireland, Ghana, the Hawaiian Islands, wherever we're from, at some point in our line, there were indigenous either teachers or practitioners, shamans, wherever we come from. And they're there. So when we're engaging in this kind of work, those spirits see it. They see it, they hear it, they see what we're doing, and they will come forward and begin to also teach. Now, it's slow compared to like being able to open up a book and just learn everything in one sitting, but it's still really profound teaching, and it's worth it. It's because you can combine that with book learning, with taking a class, having a godparent, having an elder, and all those pieces together kind of round you out and round out your ability to learn well beyond the course, and so that is my other hope for people, that as they do the work, bond with the spirits that are in this course, to each one of those spirits, kind of based on what they tend to kind of specialize in and focus on, that each spirit will teach you some things about how to do even stuff that's in the class. You know, I've had it happen where I take a class from someone, and maybe there's a spirit that person is advocating or teaching in the class, and I engage that spirit in the way that they say. And inevitably, when I do that, that spirit's like, okay, cool, yeah, you got me, I got you. But all the stuff they said to do, you don't need to do all of that. This is how you do it. And I'm like, oh, really? And they start teaching me a totally different way from even what the teacher is teaching. Not completely different, but they just have this way of kind of tossing aside almost what's almost fluff and not important, and kind of say, this is all you need to do and focus on from what that person taught. All this other stuff, you don't need it. It's actually not going to work for you.
Yeah, I mean, that's the juicy stuff right there. Yeah. Getting,
because I want to know that
spirit teachers. I mean, that is taking it to the next level. I've experienced that too.
Yeah, and and I appreciate it, because I don't want to be wasting my time. I don't have time to waste, so I don't want to be experimenting like that when I really need to get something done. I don't want 50% of what I'm doing to be completely wrong and ineffective. So I appreciate when the spirit's like,
spinning your wheels.
Nope. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Like, nope, get rid of that, do this, change that here, put this here instead of there. I'm like, oh, okay. And I do it and it works. So people will experience that here. Because before I offered this class, I did my own work with the spirits that I'm teaching about. I think nothing else is cornier than an instructor or a teacher who makes a class and they don't actually work with the spirits and the tools that they're teaching. So yeah, I definitely did that, and I'm already experiencing the things that I'm talking about. Where they're absolutely telling me to change.
Very vital.
Yeah, they're telling me what to change and do and adjust and adapt to, and that also is a big part of developing a more advanced practice.
Absolutely.
And that's not something that people typically teach in their courses either, because it's very, my experience of it is it's very organic. It's not like, if I wrote a book, I wouldn't even be able to fully explain that process, other than to say, no, just really make the effort to connect, really make that effort, prioritize the connection, connect before you start asking the spirit to do stuff. Just feel them, experience them, see them, talk to them, see what they had to say, see how they feel when you're in different aspects of your life. How do they feel when you're with your girlfriend? How do they feel when you're with your best friend? How do they feel when you're on vacation? And start to really sense how they are in different spaces with you, much like we are with each other. We're all a little different depending on, like if I'm hanging out with you in a bar having drinks, that's going to be very different from doing this interview, because then I'm going to really have my
different things. We're going to dress different. Yeah, different
and
people bring out
let my hair down. And just kind of kick back and have a good time, as opposed to kind of this focused conversation. So spirits are no different. They do the same. They are the same with us. So I think those are all, kind of in summary, I think those are all different things that people will experience and benefits they'll have, and much, much more. It's not all, one of the exciting and sometimes daunting things about spirit work is there are aspects of it that are unpredictable. There are aspects of it that are not in our control.
Right.
In terms of what the spirit may show, teach, say, we don't control that. The part we control is how we frame the relationship with them, and then how we work with them after that. That's the part we control. And, we go into pretty deep detail about that, all the way to the last lesson of the class, where in the last lesson, I actually spend quite a bit of time talking about each individual spirit that's been introduced over the 16 weeks total, and give some of my own thoughts, kind of parting thoughts about, okay, well, the black man at the crossroads, this is how we've been working with him, but there's some other stuff here too that we just didn't cover because the class would be twice as long if we did that. And so I say,
Right.
here are some things to think about. Here are some things to kind of bear in mind as you do your work that you may see and follow up on, and with the other spirits as well, So I really try to equip the people who are going to take this with, tools that are going to really sustain them for a lifetime of work. But that was really the root question for myself in creating the course of, not only how could I make an advanced class, but how could I do it in a way that would sustain a practitioner over a lifetime,
Absolutely.
So hopefully
That's
I did that. We'll see.
phenomenal. And you're really equipping someone to begin to become a root worker. It's huge.
Absolutely. Yeah, and to try to do my little part to keep the tradition from both dying out, but also from changing in such a way that you kind of lose the heart of the tradition.
Right.
There's a lot of talk of cultural misappropriation and things like that, and those are issues. But I feel a little bit differently than other people do about some of that. So when I look at hoodoo and I look at the history of it up until today, I see a tradition that has constantly adapted and evolved over time. Like it's not what it is today is not the same thing that it was when it started during slavery.
Absolutely.
It just wasn't. Because it encountered all the different cultural groups that came to America or forcefully came to America or were dragged to America or ran away from another country to America, whatever it is. Every time it encountered one of those groups of people, it changed, it adapted, it absorbed who they were, but it also gave to them. And it created this really powerful synergy with whatever that group was and the established group that was here. And it actually, to me, gives us a really good model for how to navigate some of the nonsense that we see going on in our world right now, where you have people that are going increasingly divided, set, rigidly apart from each other, saying we're so different that there's no way for us to be together, live together, work together. And that's just not true.
Right.
It's just not true. In the history of
truth
this
is
country,
those people are not wanting to put in the energy and the vulnerability it takes to repair and work together, right?
Right. And it's an inaccurate read of American history because there have always been people of all so-called races and ethnicities who have stood against the tides of hatred, bigotry, violence, whatever ism you want to plug in. There've always been people who have stood against those things: sexism, racism, homophobia. There's always been people from the very beginning. There've always been people, and they, sometimes they've been a very small minority, but that voice has always been there, and that voice is a part of hoodoo. So when we do hoodoo in our day, that's why in the first class, I started with the social location, because I want people to be mindful of who they are as they're studying and learning and being in community with each other, to name that so that there's no one kind of being this amorphous, unnamed human being that didn't come from somewhere, because we know that's not true. Everybody comes from somewhere. That's just an assumption that we can safely make. We all came from somewhere, either in this country or outside of it. And that all of that, colors and affects who we are, and it affects how we do the work. And even more so when you're talking about advanced work, where now you're getting into some areas of hoodoo that if you don't have your, what together, and you start cursing people left and right, you're going to get tore up from the floor because you don't understand certain things about energy and how energy works. Now, I'm not talking about threefold law or any of that kind of, or karma, none of that, because all of that is foreign to hoodoo. It is not a part of hoodoo, but energy definitely is. And having a very healthy respect for how For example, when a root worker does a lot of baneful work, you're supposed to do hyssop bath. And that's because there's an understanding that the miasma of all the negativity, it will build up. Even if you're super careful, take all the precautions, kind of universal spiritual precautions, to use a healthcare term. Even if you do all of that, you're still, over time, over repeated negative workings, you're still going to pick stuff up. And if you don't know what to do about that, it's going to catch up with you. It's going to affect your health. It's going to affect your home and your relationships with your family. It's going to affect your love life, your sex life. It's going to affect your work. Really, it can affect any area of your life. And sometimes what gets affected is kind of influenced by those workings that you're doing. So if you're doing a lot of stuff to this is a terrible example, but if you're doing stuff like to curse people's kids, but I hope people don't do, that's a line that I hope people do not cross. But if you do that, don't be surprised if you start having problems at home with your kids.
Yeah.
That you never had before. Like, it just out of the blue. It's like, what is going on with Johnny? And it's because you're messing around and you're not cleaning yourself off and taking care of yourself and cleaning your house periodically, or having a dedicated space for that kind of work outside of your home. And it's just staying in your house, kind of swirling around, sitting in the corners, sitting in the closets, going boo every time you open up the closet. And next thing you know, you're the next version of the Poltergeist movie, Poltergeist Part 4. So that's why I go over that stuff, both in the intro class, but much more deeply in the advanced class. There's a whole unit devoted to kind of advanced house cleansing, and also how you kind of nail down your house, so to speak, to make it a lot harder for spirits and negative energy to even get in to the house to begin with.
Right.
But even with all that, you have to be cleaning your house. And so I go over that in much more detail in the second class. And the reason why I didn't do that in the first one is because some of that stuff is more advanced. And so I just wanted people in the first class to get used to and kind of develop their own rhythm for cleaning their house. And I don't mean cleaning with spick and span. I mean like spiritually cleaning the house, to just get used to that, because a lot of us aren't used to that, unless you come from a tradition or religion that kind of emphasizes, no, you need to keep your house clean. Most of us don't do that. And sometimes even those of us who do don't do it as often as we should. And then we start having problems. So I devote a whole week to just that topic, just that subject.
Wonderful. And we need more of this really in-depth instruction.
Yeah,
and that's huge.
It is.
That's a huge honor for us to be able to offer through the school. Yeah. We're so thrilled to have you offering courses through our school, and especially of this level of depth and quality that's really unmatched.
Thank you. And particularly the bathroom and the bedroom. Those are two places where we are often at our most vulnerable, and particularly when we're sleeping. So I go into pretty good detail about, okay, here are the things according to Hoodoo that you do to kind of keep that area safe, peaceful, kind of much harder for entities of any sort to kind of just come into that space and spook you when you're deep in this sleep. And by the end of that unit, people will have what they need, to really take care of those aspects of their home, for themselves, for the kids, even for their pets. I don't talk specifically about pets, so that might result in a little extra worksheet that week, especially if people are interested in it. But any of this stuff can be applied to pets, much like powwow, the Pennsylvania German powwow tradition. That tradition is heavily pet-centered, I guess. Not just pet-centered, but animal-centered, I guess I'll say, because that was mainly a rural practice, much like how Voodoo started. It was a rural practice. So pretty much any spell, any working, it's like, okay, this works for the cows and it works for dad. It's no different. So there's a similar sense, I think, in Hoodoo, that a lot of what you would do for humans, you can transfer that over to your pets. Not so much edible stuff. Be very careful with what you feed your animals, but a lot of the other workings about cleansing and things can be done with animals. So, yeah.
I love that. And I love in folk magic how it is so very hands-on and practical and get it done. We don't need frills. We don't need a lot. We don't need fancy tools. We just get down and dirty and get it done.
Get it done. Exactly. Now, that said, I did want to challenge myself a little bit, but also I wanted to give people some tools. So there's a few 2 or 3 weeks, can't remember off the top of my head, but there's a few weeks where we do actually explore kind of personal spiritual development, psychic development, so to speak, and something kind of close to theurgy, for people who are more familiar with that word, because Hoodoo does have that. It's just that's not the, like you just said, it's not the big focus. The big focus is on getting stuff done, but because of its African and Christian and Jewish roots, there is definitely also that theurgic component. For example, the book, I think it's called Power of the Psalms by Godfrey Selig. That's basically a reproduction of a Jewish text, a Jewish Kabbalistic text that's about practical Jewish psalm magic. And in that text, the text is very rootworking. I think that, most of what it talks about is like, here's how to cure a fever, here's how to keep your wife from leaving you when you've done something really stupid, that kind of thing. But it also has stuff in there like, here's how you use this psalm to, you go to church on the day and hour of the sun, and you sit and you recite this psalm, and you meditate on this name of God, and it will help you to develop yourself spiritually and to develop your connection with God. So that is in there. There are aspects of that. And so I give people over those couple of weeks, I'm thinking of, I give them a way to do that as well. Very simple. Yeah, it's very simple. I stay within the spirit of Hoodoo. It's not like hardcore ceremonial magic, but it's just a simple way for a person to kind of sit and ground themselves. They can work with the spirit ally that they've been developing a relationship with as well if they want, but they don't have to, and really connect with themselves as the spirit, and check in and see how they're feeling, see where maybe they're a little off. And then they know when they emerge from that, they then know, okay, well, I'm a little off emotionally because of those workings I did last week that were really hard. So now I know this week I've got to make baths that kind of strengthen me mentally. That and that give me that kind of infuse my mind and my spirit with a sense of peace and calm and tranquility, and knowing that everything's going to be okay, and clearing my third eye so I can see more clearly through those emotions and be ready for continuing to do the work, but also to be in a good place, to be grounded and solid again. So there are weeks devoted to that too.
Teaching about those things. I mean, one thing I find so beautiful about the way you teach all this is you are really giving people the tools to both become very knowledgeable and skillful practitioners, and also learn how to thrive more in their personal lives.
Right. Because I see them as connected,
Absolutely.
It's not just learn the how to, it's not just learning how to work with the tools of your tradition, but also having your own personal experience of how all that the tradition offers affects you as a person, and how it keeps you strong and balanced. And this is what it did for our ancestors' practices, stuff, black, white, and otherwise. The people who lived on the mountain, this is how they were able to live in that harsh environment.
Absolutely.
Where I know I know from studying, I can imagine that, you know, life wasn't easy on that, and isn't easy for those who are still on the mountain, living on the mountain. So, you know, you need to have a spirituality that can kind of rise to that challenge, you know, and keep the people strong, you know, and keep them from falling apart when times are hard. Hoodoo is very much the same, you know, for those who were enslaved, for all the other groups who encountered it, you know, it helped them through difficult times as well. So yeah, that's a very important part to me, you know, the personal development, because that also is what sustains you, because that is what deepens your personal sense of investment. You know, that's where your sense of what's at stake for me in practicing hoodoo comes from. You know, and then by the end of this class, people will know what's at stake for them. You know, whether they decide to become a professional root worker or just work for their family or even just for themselves. And all of those options are all valid. You know, those are all things that root workers throughout history have done. Not every root worker was a professional root worker. Not every root worker was working for their whole big community writ large. Some just worked for their family. Some literally just kept the practice in the family, which is one of the reasons why it's so hard to find traditional workers, because a lot of those workers don't share it because they don't want to. It's literally something that they keep in their family, you know, and the way they practice it is a very family-based tradition, much like certain forms of traditional witchcraft. I know they're very much like that too, where sometimes it's a family, you know, this family has done it this way for 10 generations since they were back in Europe. And it hasn't changed a whole lot. You know, by the time they came to America and Illinois, you know, they're still doing it like their ancestors did. And there's power in that. It's very, very powerful. So, you know, we kind of have our own version of how we'll do that, you know, over the time of this class. But I do very much want people to know I am not expecting everybody to become a professional root worker at the end of the course. You know, that's a very kind of intense personal choice, because once you open up that floodgate, it can be kind of like, whoa, you know. When people hear about you and when they know you're good at it, you know, you're going to be busy really quick, you know.
It's definitely something akin to a calling, I would say.
Absolutely.
I don't know what kind of terminology.
No, I think that's a great one, because as you know, many root workers historically were Christian. And even some were also, if they weren't full-on clergy, they were deacons of the church. They were very high-level lay spiritual leaders. You know, so
and they did not view what they were doing as opposing their faith.
Right, and neither did the community, because you know they would all go to church on Sunday morning. And, you know, church would get over maybe at 2 o'clock or something. And by 5 o'clock, you know, Deacon so-and-so goes home. He's looking at his watch. And, you know, there's people lined around his house. But they're coming with their problems, you know. And he was helping in church, you know, in the morning. Now he's doing woodwork in the afternoon, you know. And the people didn't see a disconnect. They didn't see like that didn't make sense. It did make sense to them, because particularly for African descended people, that's where we came from back, you know, on the continent. You know, the witch doctor, shaman, priest, or whatever they were, depending on the tribe, that person was both the spiritual leader often, and also the people that people went to with problems, you know, marital
profoundly important cultural role.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And so much was lost in America. So hoodoo is one of the ways that all that stuff kind of, you know, even with what was disrupted, it was one of the ways that African Americans were able to kind of maintain and kind of bring back together and maintain some of those Africanisms, you know, from the continent, you know, from prior to slavery.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I do wonder if, you know, a lot of the more mainstream stances of fundamentalist church groups that preach against doing things like hoodoo and various folk magical practices, I mean, that you really see the inherent oppression and kind of the systemic oppression, the colonizer oppression there. And one of the things why I believe so passionately in the work you do is you say, no, I'm going to fly in the face of that, and I'm going to teach this because this is vitally important. This is important to share with future generations.
Absolutely. I don't know if you remember, Calahn, it was probably a good 2 months ago, if not longer, but one of my Facebook posts, it was a picture of an African-American man. He was kind of sitting at this table, and it had like all this, what I would call indigenous medicine looking stuff on the table. And he was dressed in a suit, I believe, but he kind of had accoutrements around him that almost, it was almost like a cognitive dissonance thing, because it was like he looked very formal on one hand, but then he got this indigenous stuff around him. And that man was one of the founding fathers of Black Pentecostalism.
Wow.
Founding father. And I had the image a while ago and I lost it. And I was like, I need to find it. I need to find it because it just sums it all up. And I found it. I was like, yes. So then I made the post about it, and I explained to people who he was and some of the history behind it. So if anybody knows, that church is called the Church of God in Christ, today is, on, spirits, divination, root work, witchcraft, like all that is like a hell to the no, like it's just Jesus only, period. But what's interesting about him is they really wanted, back in the day, they really wanted to throw him out when they found out who he really, really was. They wanted to just throw him out of the church altogether, even though he was one of the founders. But they could not deny the power of God working in his life. They couldn't deny it, because they saw it. They saw it, with the things he was doing, the way he preached, the healings and things he did. Like, they saw the power of God working in him, and so they could not deny that. So they kind of tolerated it. Very uneasy toleration, but they tolerated it. They put it up with it probably until he passed away. So, I highlight that to say to people, this stuff has been around, and for Black people, for African Americans, it's been around. And it's very disingenuous for our religious leaders to pretend like it hasn't been. And not only that it hasn't been, but that it's been intimately wedded with, the Black Christian faith. And it always has been. Now people have rejected it and pushed it away and all of that, but the history of it was there. It was there right at the start. And then there are people like me who are like, yeah, and it's gonna come back. So
yeah.
That's what I'm doing.
Get rid of us that easy.
No, you cannot. And you can't get rid of the ancestors that easy, So, because they're the ones that are making it happen. They're the reason why this class is being taught. They're the reason why, I would argue they're the reason why they're the Blackthorne School to begin with, because they want this stuff to not die. They want their tradition to stay alive. And it doesn't matter which tradition it is, because they're in all these traditions. Because what we're practicing, our ancestors practice in some form. So, it's an exciting time to be alive. It's an exciting time to be teaching. It's an exciting time to be bringing these old ways back.
It really is.
And able to share it.
And I do think it's so fascinating. I see these common threads between different traditions as well of, in most cultures where Christianity has been present, there have been folk magical practices, especially for people who have been historically disempowered in some way, whether it's African Americans in the US, or whether it's, people practicing folk Catholicism, in Latin America, or even in traditional witchcraft, a lot of the wise women who would be the doctors before there were doctors, but yet were burned at the stake for being largely due to being women that other people didn't like,
Right.
having influence and power when it wasn't okay for women to have power. So
Right.
in no way am I minimizing anybody's struggle. I want to simply highlight that it has been, these sorts of practices have been so vital for people who have experienced oppression of all kinds.
Right. Well, and people may not know this, but I speak about this, and I've had doctors confirm what I'm about to say, particularly doctors of color, that in America, before the medical profession became the kind of standardized thing that it is today, root workers existed alongside medical doctors.
Absolutely.
And often they were more effective. They were more effective at being able to heal than those medical doctors were, because medicine was almost kind of sort of a joke at that point. It's doing weird stuff, and it just didn't kind of have itself together the way that it wasn't as grounded in science as it is today.
Mm-hmm.
So, but in the American context, particularly during the time of American slavery, slaves by and large weren't even allowed access to medical doctors. So my ancestors had no choice but to rely on their root workers in the community to keep them from getting sick and dying and so forth. But then what the medical profession did is they came up with the idea of practicing with a license, and which is not a bad idea in theory. But what they did when they kind of legislated that and convinced the politicians to sign on to that, and they then made it illegal for anyone else to practice anything that looked remotely like Western medical medicine.
Mm.
So overnight, root workers were, ending up in court, going to jail, whenever they practice. So,
Wow.
I explained to people, this is why most of us who sell rootworking stuff, there'll be a little disclaimer somewhere that says, like, for entertainment purposes only, please consult your medical doctor for any medical condition you may have, because that's the way that root workers around the country keep themselves from being in any way vulnerable to the law. And there are still laws on the books in certain states that actually make it illegal to practice medicine without a license in any way whatsoever. I mean, there are some that are more careful with the wording and language, but there are some that are not. So if I'm practicing root work and doing anything that's remotely, like medical herbology or anything like that, even if I know what I'm doing, I could still get in trouble. So overnight, this was a way to further disempower the communities, where they weren't even allowing us to go to doctors to begin with,
Right.
So a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah, I love that you brought this up, and I want to also add, it's often been, just the best that people could access who are less privileged, have less resources. Maybe they wanted to go to a doctor, but they couldn't afford one. And so at least this person knew something that would give them some sort of relief, and who are we to really judge? Are they just supposed to go without? No.
So it's just,
I can see
a lot of wild history like that, wild American history of how things came to be that, when I learned that, I was like, what? That's ridiculous, but it is what it is.
It truly speaks to the ongoing systemic oppression that root workers do have to give that disclaimer of for entertainment purposes only, because it feels kind of yucky and invalidating of, hey, this is a legitimate spiritual service I offer, but yet, well, I'm not that I'm offering root work services, to be clear, but just getting in this concept, this is, not something that I would want to invalidate, but in order to protect oneself legally, it's they feel kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place about how to
And I also want to be clear, like I'm not saying that, root workers should go out and play doctor. I mean, if you want to really incorporate what I call medical herbology, if you want to incorporate that into your practice, I think it's awesome to do. But I would strongly encourage someone to actually take courses or even get a degree in that, because you do need to know what you're doing around, dosing and handling, herbs, the proper amount, the proper
Absolutely.
concentration, I mean, that's a whole other ball of wax.
Absolutely.
And most of our ancestors, regardless of tradition, they did that, but they had to experiment. They had to figure out, okay, what is the right amount of willow bark
Mhm.
to replicate what an aspirin pill does now? What amount of that do I need to have and give to this person for their pain to really be relieved, but also to not put them into
Absolutely.
a coma,
I'm so glad that you gave that caveat. We do not in any way recommend people,
Right.
Substituting, care of a licensed medical professional
Right.
with root work, but we, are saying that it 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 won't hurt, in addition to getting the care that someone needs, and
Right.
it could really help.
Absolutely.
And I think that's part of being an ethical practitioner, uh, recognizing when to refer someone or when someone is in need of a different type of care than one is able to provide.
Right. Right. And to your point, there's a medical doctor, I believe he's Chinese American, I think, who I met where I work, and he was talking about medical ethics, and I brought this issue up, and he's like, yeah, I'm aware of that. It's a messed up history, that we have the same problem as Chinese people. He said, but it's slowly changing, because what medicine is able to do is sometimes Western medicine is able to do the experimentation and research to see that some of these indigenous approaches actually are really effective for certain conditions, and so then they start incorporating some of that into the medicine. So there is kind of
Absolutely.
a slow, whatever you want to call it, kind of a slow not merging, but kind of coming to the table a bit, of the indigenous folk traditions and medicine, which is interesting. It'll be interesting to see where that is maybe 50 years from now.
It really is.
Yeah.
And as someone who has studied herbalism, in a herbal medicine type program, not that I offer those services. I don't feel qualified enough to offer those services myself,
Right.
despite having
Right.
studied it pretty in depth compared to
Right.
most people. But I do believe that it's, and I've learned that, herbs, they have all these different constituents that when we take out one component, that's where you start getting a lot of symptoms that you don't want, or
Right.
maybe it cures one thing but then you add to your problems in another way. But when the beauty of herbalism, and this can be seen in traditional Chinese medicine like you mentioned, is that it more sets up the body to thrive and for ongoing good health over time, and it's more of a slow approach
Right.
versus traditional Western medicine, which is more geared toward
Boom.
instant relief,
Right.
emergent, managing emergency and crisis situations, curing a really dreadful illness, someone's that's violently ill. And, there is a place for both types of medicines, but I
Right.
really feel
Right.
that today's current Western medicine is really neglecting this part of, well, how do we thrive? How do we nourish and nurture the body in a way that helps us to thrive? And
Right.
this can all be seen in a lot of root work in terms of, I think there is a beautiful approach toward full body and spiritual health.
Right. Right.
And
Absolutely.
we of course can't get into like the deep medicinal herbalism in your course, but I do think this is a really important topic that needs to
Right.
be discussed more often in this sort of work.
Me too. And certainly, of course, I know, knowing both of us, we also have strong connections in our other work with mental health as well.
Mhm.
So that's the other area that's much I see much the same way as I do like medical herbology. That
Right.
a practitioner really needs to know that line. Like they need to be able to not assess per se, but like I have clients that I've read for when I do the reading, and I can see that there's a big mental health issue there, and they're coming for something else, but I can see that the mental health is a part of the mix, and it's a big part of the mix. And
Mhm.
so then I have to kind of, with my other hat, then I have to kind of assess like, okay, is this something that I can really help them with? Is it something where I can help them with this part over here, but they really need, a therapist, psychiatrist, or whatever? And I'm gonna say that and say, hey, I can help you with this right here, just one little piece. But all that over there, because you got
Yeah.
some DSM-4 going on over there,
Being a skilled practitioner to
Yeah,
know what you don't know,
right.
right? And
Because
what
you
you
can
need to
quickly
refer
get in,
out for.
right? Because you can quickly get in over your head and get in situations where that other, because you said yes, kind of kind of unqualified yes, you can get into a situation where that creates really unrealistic expectations of things that magic can't really fix, because it's more of something, either something organic or something that's I don't know what the appropriate words to say, so I'm just going to say what's off the top of my head, kind of deeply broken in that person that you can't just fix with magic, that they really need a therapist or a psychiatrist.
Right.
They really need medication. And once
That's
they
the
get all of that,
medicine they need, right?
right. And then once it doesn't invalidate anything about the magic, because what happens is once that part of them is kind of stabilized and cared for, then the magic actually is, this is Jason Miller's term, but making your magic enchantable. So to me, when a person gets that part of themselves taken care of, then the magic actually will work 10 times better, because then the
Mhm.
magic doesn't have to deal with all of that to
Right.
address
And the magic
the
can
spiritual.
really take the healing to the next level.
Right. And that mental illness thing or mental health thing is not kind of overbearing the whole situation in such a way that the magic has nowhere to kind of break through, so that's how I see it. And that's something, we'll talk about that a bit in the class too. I the weeks that are about things like coercion and influencing and confusion, things like that. I talk a lot about the will, the importance of the will, and understanding how the mechanics of that when you're doing magic that's really working against someone else, even if they're not a practitioner, not aware that you're doing it, they still have a will, and that will is still going to be able to fight. It's going to be able to resist, what you're doing. So you have to know, how to break through that, how to get around it. If ethically, if you even want to do all of that, does it make sense to do that? Because 9 times out of 10, it doesn't. 9 times out of 10, it's not a good idea. So we talk about that. We talk about, is that a good idea to do? Are you ready for the long haul? Because that kind of work is really hard work. That's like court case work to me. Like it takes a lot of time, a lot of resources,
Mhm.
kind of daily tending to, that this is not fire and forget kind of stuff. Because if you fire and forget, a couple of days later, their will's going to kick in and your candle's going to start burning black and you're ignoring it. And, next thing you know, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Because you weren't paying attention. You weren't paying attention to what the candle was telling you to go, uh-oh, something's going on. What's going on? And you check and go, okay, I got to add more candles. I got to do this. I got to do that. I got to blow some smoke. I got to get a skull candle. I got to talk to them at night. I got to really stay on top of them, and that is actually kind of traditionally, historically, even the workings that are traditional to hoodoo, like tying down someone's sexual nature. You know, I talk about that. I give an example of it, and I say, you know, so just know if you do this, like, this is not something where, you know, you just do it one time and you put it in a sock drawer and you forget about it. You gotta stay on top of it. You gotta, you know, you gotta be checking on it. You gotta be kind of watching the person and seeing if what you're doing is really getting to them. Because if it's not, you're gonna have to adjust. You might have to do another ritual on it. You might have to repeat it. You know, and it's kind of dangerous because if they see what you're doing, they're not gonna be happy with you.
Yeah, it can really backfire.
You need to be careful.
Yeah,
I need to be really careful because those, I'm not a big advocate of those workings because they came out of a particular time and place that we by and large are not in anymore. You know, we're not in a situation for the most part where our freedom could be taken away from us at a moment's notice, where somebody could bust in down the door of your house and drag your husband away and you'll never see him again. You know, like, we're not really in a situation like that unless we're, like, you know, selling drugs to Colombia. You know, then yeah, you might have somebody bust down your door. But, you know, other than something extreme like that, you know, we're not really in those kinds of situations traditionally. So you really have to know as a root worker why you're doing that.
right.
You have to know inside of yourself, like, what's driving my motives for this? Is it because I can't let go of the person, even though they've clearly let go of me? You know, am I still holding on?
Yeah, why do I hold on to something that wants to leave? You know, why do I not open up to the good ones that want to come to me?
And let that person go. Let them be happy with what they want to do. You go find your happiness.
Yeah.
You know, why waste all that time and spiritual energy?
Why would you be brooding over this very controlling, willful act when you could be out there enjoying your life and attracting, you know, someone more that you've grown into, you know?
Right. And I've literally had that conversation with people. I said exactly those same words, like, you sure you want to do that? Why do you want to do that? I can see from this reading that he's gone. Like, he's mentally gone. He's about physically gone. What are you waiting for? You know? Now, that said, I know that there are people who are still sometimes vulnerable, you know, like single moms, you know, or not even single moms, but just moms that are in a marriage, in a relationship where they're financially dependent on the husband.
Right.
And he's out there philandering and doing his thing. And if she just leaves him, she's gonna lose that financial stability. So that's a real issue. And that's something where if a root worker takes on a case like that, again, you have to know what to do. You have to know.
You have to weigh potential consequences and the weight of the work, and
you gotta weigh. You gotta be able to. You have to be a good counselor, because you're gonna have to help that person understand that she needs to really get her life to a place of financial independence from this husband before she leaves, so that her kids and her don't suffer if there's kids. And really kind of put the piece, you know, slowly but surely put the pieces together for her own independence first. And then you can do this other stuff to get rid of the guy and make sure he goes away. But again, you know, making things enchantable, you know, you got to make sure that you help that person create the conditions so that their life doesn't fall apart as they're trying to free themselves, you know? But I know there's people out there who won't think like that. They won't think about the kind of big picture. They'll just think about, oh, okay, this person came and they want to get rid of this person, so I'm just gonna help them do that. But it's like, whoa, wait a minute, wait, what did you just tell me? You know, and then like, okay, well, you can't do that yet. You got to take care of this first. And if they don't see that, if they don't see that they have to take care of that first, then they need clarity work. You know, because something's not connecting, that, you know, I can't just leave. I have to think this through. You know, so again, not expecting people to be a therapist, but I do want people to be aware that counseling is a part of it, you know. So if you don't feel secure in that, and I can't go deep into that into the class, but that, as you know, counseling and therapy is its own beast. That takes a lot of study.
Master's degree is worth
exactly,
and that's you know.
Right. You know, so we can't really cover that in the class. So I would say, you know, if someone decides to be a professional worker, they're really going to have to do some additional work and training around counseling just to prepare themselves for the
knowing
situations that
how
are
to
going to come.
be an ethical practitioner and guide people to the resources they need, and having, I think, having a very skilled mentor to consult when, not if, when they need someone to consult with, because we all need to consult with people from time to time.
Absolutely. And also knowing how to refer, much like community clergy, where you know, I'm a pastor of a church somewhere. I'm not a therapist. I'm not even a counselor. I'm somewhat of a pastoral counselor, but for most clergy, that is a very like counseling light level. It's not at all in depth.
It's a profoundly different role than a really intense mental health counselor, you know, like very a clinical counselor. Yeah.
Right. Very different. So, you know, for most pastors, one of the first things they do when they move somewhere, they immediately start kind of getting to know the domestic violence center, the mental health folks that are there, the homeless housing folks, and they just avail themselves of all those resources so that when those people with those problems come, they can say, hey, you know, I'm glad you're here. I want to help you. This is a bit beyond my pay grade, but I do know somebody that I can send you to, take you to, refer you to. Let me give them a call, and they'll help you. You know? And then, so, you know, root workers kind of need to be able to do the same thing, you know, because people will come with those same kind of issues. I've had all of them. So, you know, knowing what to do with that is really, really important. Yeah.
Well, I'm keeping an eye on the time, and we probably need to wind down here, but I did want to quickly, I don't want to end because I could talk to you all night about this, but you know, but I did want to have you speak a bit to that. I know that most of the people who will be taking this course have taken your first course, which is called Working the Roots. And then this second course is called Working the Spirit. But for those who haven't taken your first course, how would they know if this was the right fit? Maybe they're listening to all this saying, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I've been looking for. And I know some things about hoodoo, you know, but can you just describe, you know, who needs to be taking this course?
Sure. So part of your question that I hear is kind of, I'll say outsiders, you know, people, meaning people who haven't taken the Working the Roots course, so how they would know. So some of that answer is, you know, based on that person's other traditions. So for example, if a person is a Pennsylvania Dutch Brauerei or powwow, you know, if they come from that tradition is quite different on some level, but it's also very similar to hoodoo. So I would feel confident that a person coming from that tradition has the same level of basic knowledge that if they came into the advanced course, they would see some things that are familiar. I'd be a little surprised if they were there though, just because my read of powwow is very Christian and really shies away from baneful work. You know, and it's
very focused on healing.
Yeah, healing, you know, really calling on God and you know, protecting from, you know, negative, baneful things. So I'd be a little surprised. I'd be like, okay, you're welcome, but it's gonna be a little interesting for you. But you know, they might would, and I would feel comfortable in terms of their knowledge base. Most traditional tradecraft people, I would be, you know, comfortable with that, because from what I know of traditional witchcraft, it has a lot of the same kind of categories and know-how, and you know, doesn't shy away from negative things. So I think there would be some cultural adjustments and things, but nothing that I think would be, you know, hard for somebody to move through. I can't even, my mind is blanking on other traditions right now. Some of the African derived traditions, even some of the African traditional religions, they would probably be pretty comfortable here.
I imagine that
Um,
would dovetail fairly easily into
right,
this
right.
course from what I know about the course.
The indigenous, some of the indigenous Asian traditions that I know of, they would probably, again, there would be a bit of a translation that would need to happen for them. But I think that they would find a lot of stuff very familiar with what they know.
So basically,
So
it sounds like if someone has been studying a folk magic tradition of some kind in depth, they probably know enough basics to do well in this course. But
right,
if they have doubt, it would be good for them to at least reach out to us and verify if it's a good fit. And I think you're wanting students to reach out if they haven't taken your first
absolutely,
course.
yeah,
And I mean, if in doubt also, why not take the first course first and really do some of that deep learning, because your first course is profound in and of itself.
right,
It's not
right,
just your basic Hoodoo 101 course. It's much more in depth than that. So
right. And
I don't want people to, you know, I think, like you said, we don't want people necessarily to rush into this really heavy lifting type of work.
right, and I also, with the advanced course, the other reason why I didn't want to just kind of open that up like the intro, without a prerequisite, is because, um, so for one thing, I don't think I said this earlier. We actually split the advanced course into two modules,
Mhm.
because when we talked about it, we kind of we started to see the more we were talking that it's just a lot of material. It's not an overwhelming amount of material.
You and I, we had phone calls. Rev Doctor, it's a 16-week course and it's so heavy. I think people might need a little break.
Right, 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 right. And there will be breaks. So that's the other thing I want people to know, because I did it in my intro course where I think we have one break. So in these two modules, there'll probably be two, with each module, just
Mhm.
because, there are weeks that are much more dense in terms of the material than others, and so I really want to give people that breathing room to kind of
Mhm.
go, okay, that was a lot last week. Thank God there's a break coming up, so I can really like sit with it and absorb it and make sure I understand it and ask a lot of questions and be good, for the subsequent weeks. Um, so I would say, the second part of your question, I would say that this course is really for people who want to go deeper than a one-on-one, who are tired
Mhm.
of that kind of repeated thing, and who are really ready to, take their own practice to a whole other level, that will sustain them for the long term. You
Yeah,
know,
this is
um,
really a profound gift you are offering the community. I am
well, thank you.
so admiring of you and your work. I'm so privileged and proud to be able to offer it through my school. It is a tremendous honor, and I am
Thank you.
so
Thank you.
grateful to have you as my friend and brother, and also
Me
as an
too.
instructor.
Yeah,
Just
me too.
can't convey enough how grateful we are to have you, and
Thank you. I'm
for
grateful to
all
be here.
that you so generously share with us. Thank you.
Absolutely. You're welcome. You're welcome. And
I
I want, the other piece that I've said in the first course, which remains true here, is this is also a crossroads practice to me, meaning, you can definitely practice it all by itself. It's completely self-contained, but it also dovetails really, really well with other forms of magic that are out there. I myself do that, where I'm a root worker, but I also practice, leukemy and some other traditions. And even when I'm doing stuff in those other traditions, I'm often using the tools of root work to do my magic, to do a working, to protect somebody, to fight this or deal with that or clean this off. It's always those root work principles are always there. So that's my hope for people too, that they find a way to meaningfully wed this to what they already do and have an even more powerful, fruitful, prosperous practice over time. Yeah.
wonderful.
And I'm
Well, thank
glad to
you.
have this opportunity today, because I think that we talked about some things here that I haven't talked about anywhere else. And I really wanted to do that with you so that people kind of get this other slice of, why we're doing this class together. And I'm
Yes,
so excited.
absolutely. I really love the depth of information you share. I know I learn more than one new thing every time I talk to you. It's one of my favorite things about you. And you have such depth of knowledge and experience. And any student would be profoundly lucky to have you as their teacher. So I highly encourage everyone to really give some thought to this new course, because this is a gift. And a gift like this doesn't come around that often, especially by such a compassionate and experienced, wise teacher.
Well, thank you. I appreciate those words, and I'm excited to see everybody in class and have another fun ride. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yes. Oh, yes. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. And for anyone interested in the course, we will provide the link in the description, and you are more than welcome to reach out to us at support@theblackthornschool.com. Blackthorn spelled with an E. So support@theblackthorn with an E school.com. Thank you all.
Take care, everybody.